back to the Football Corner podcast. And before we start today's episode, I would like to say, if you're watching me on YouTube or you listen to me on a podcast app, please like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and please subscribe to the podcast. Thank you. Cue it up. So going into week 2 of the NFL 2022 NFL season, there's two teams I would like to keep the momentum going. Okay, number one would be the New York Giants. The New York Football Giants have been a bad team for the whole decade. Besides 2016 was an anomaly, and 2011, this team has not been that productive going to the playoffs, and they really had a quarterback problem. So after Eli Manning, they ended up driving Daniel Jones out of Duke. From my previous episodes on my podcast, you would have known how I feel about Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is a below average quarterback at best, but he showed highlights in week 1 against the Titans. Now, it was highlighted by Saquon Barkley having 164 yards on the ground and is now leading the league in rushing through 1 week of football. But I think Daniel Jones, if he really wants to prove the doubters wrong that he can be a 5th year, 6th year, 7th year quarterback that the Giants can lean on, he has to beat Carolina. The Panthers lost against the Browns without Deshaun Watson and there was Jacoby Brissett. Don't get me wrong, the Browns have a pretty good roster and their running backs can carry the team, as you saw in week 1. They had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and both those guys on the ground was probably one of the best 1-2 punches in the league in the backfield. But the Giants, this is a game you can't win. I think the Titans are better than the Browns for now, and you beat the Titans in a clutch fashion. So if you can keep the momentum riding, the Giants go out there, you're at home, beat Baker Mayfield and the Carolina Panthers, and show the world that you're a team that's here to win now and for the rest of the season. Now, the second team that I want to keep the momentum will be the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings end up being the Green Bay Packers in week 1 in a dominated fashion. See, the Green Bay Packers only scored 1 touchdown against that Vikings defense. It doesn't mean the Viking defense was that great because they only scored 1 touchdown, but it doesn't matter how many yards you get if the team never scores. And I find that very beneficial for the Vikings, who has one of the best offenses, in my opinion, in the league. Because you got Adam Thielen, you got KJ Osborne, you have Justin Jefferson, you have Dalvin Cook in the backfield, right? And then you also have Kirk Cousins. I know a few people are not high on Kirk Cousins as a quarterback, but I am. I think Kirk Cousins statistically is one of the best quarterbacks in the league over the past 5 years. Even though he doesn't win the best games, but there's 11 other men on that defensive side of football that sometimes lets him down. Or even special teams and field goal kickers that lets him down too. So the Vikings will be playing the Eagles on Monday Night Football, and they're going to Philly. Now, Philly, during week 1, had like 4 rushing touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns on the ground. They know their identity. They could pass all the way down the field, and when they get in the red zone, they're going to punch you in the mouth and run the football in the red zone with their plentiful of backs and even their quarterback, who's very mobile. So I would like to see if this Vikings defensive line, which is Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter and company, can actually stop these Eagles' running attack, because I don't think they're going to stop their passing attack. I don't think their secondary is as well-rounded, but if they can stop their running attack, you can force them into be only a pass offense, and you can have Jalen Hurts try to beat you with his arm and see if he can get the job done. Now, last week in my picks, I only had 8 out of 16, which is not bad, which is 50%. I plan on doing better this week going into week 2. So starting with the first game I have in line will be Jets versus Cleveland. I'm going to take the Browns in that victory. Washington versus Detroit. Now, Detroit played very well against the Eagles, and even though in a losing effort, the Commanders beat Jacksonville. I'm going to take the Commanders because I think Carson Wentz is the better quarterback. Tampa Bay versus New Orleans. Tampa Bay is rattled by injuries. I'm going to have to go with the Saints. Giants versus Carolina. I'm going to go with the Giants just because I think the Giants are going to ride off of momentum. Even though Baker Mayfield wants to have a bounce-back game, I believe in the Giants for now. We have Steelers versus the Patriots. I don't even know the Patriots' identity. Their offense looks very confused against the Dolphins, and I don't even know if they have a good defense. So I'm gonna go with Mitch Trubisky, who beat the reigning AFC champion Bengals. So now with the Jaguar versus Colts, Jacksonville have had the Colts number at home for the past 5 years. I'm going to say they stick to that method, and they're going to beat the Colts. Dolphins versus Baltimore, I'm going to have to go with the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Dolphins have a dynamic offense, but I don't know if they could get the job done against the Baltimore Ravens, and I'm assuming they'll have all their key pieces back in order to play in week 2. Rams versus Falcons, I'm going to have to pick the Rams in that matchup just because I think the Rams are looking to have a bounce-back game. And I thought the Falcons played pretty well against the Saints last week. They just couldn't finish when it mattered the most. Seattle versus 49ers, I'm going to have to take the 49ers in that matchup. I think Kyle Shanahan have a bounce-back game. I know Geno Smith beat the Broncos, but I think that's a one-off. I still don't think the Seahawks is a very good team. I think they will play hard, but I think the 49ers is just too talented to get beat by Geno Smith. Cowboys versus Cincinnati, I'm going to have to go to Bengals in that matchup just because the Cowboys don't have a starting quarterback. They have a backup quarterback in Cooper Rush. And Cooper Rush is a backup. So no, I'm not going to pick the Cowboys. I'm going to pick the Bengals. Houston versus Denver, also think Russell Wilson, the Broncos have a bounce-back game. Broncos could have beat the Seahawks if it wasn't for 2 goal line fumbles by Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. So I'm going to pick the Broncos in that matchup. Raiders versus Cardinals. I think the Raiders have a bounce-back game. I think Derek Carr was still trying to mess with how the offense will be against the Chargers, and I think he was force-feeding Justin Herbert in that game. Chicago versus Green Bay. I'm gonna pick Green Bay in the bounce-back game. I think Chicago is, it's still a bottom tier team. I know they beat the 49ers, and I'm glad they did. It's hard for an underdog to win games in this league, especially in that type of weather they played in last week. So I'm going to pick Green Bay in a bounce-back game. You have Buffalo versus Tennessee. I think Buffalo is going to keep riding a hot hand. I think they're one of the better teams in the league, especially in the AFC. If not number one, they're top 2. Last but not least, the last game will be Philly versus Minnesota. I'm going to pick Minnesota to beat Philly in a shootout fashion. Thanks for watching and listening to the Football Corner Podcast. Podcast episodes will be dropped on Mondays and Fridays, as well as YouTube videos on Mondays and Fridays. You could click the link in my description or to follow the social media links to my podcast social media pages. And also, you'll be able to stay up to date on new drops, new takes, and all that good stuff. Thanks for watching. See you next time.